Next up, I'd like to have Lisa Liddell give the registration services update.
Thank you, John. Next slide, please. We're just going to talk a little bit about some of the RSD statistics and some new services that we've been offering and that we will be offering. Next slide, please. Currently, ARIN has about 39,000 organizations that we serve. We have about 18% of those are our ISPs or our member organizations, while we have another almost 43% are our end user customers, and then another 39% are our legacy customers. Next slide, please. Our RSA coverage for IPv4 kind of stacks up like this. From the 6.5 million IP addresses in ARIN's inventory right now, we have about 49% are under a standard RSA with ARIN, and about 14% are under a legacy RSA, and another almost 37% are not covered. Next slide, please. Our RSA coverage over time, we like to see it going up to be covered under RSA or legacy RSA, which it's doing. So we're in pretty good shape there. And as we get more transfers coming in for M&As and even 8.3 transfers, we'll see that go up even more. Next slide, please. And this is just a little bit on our Caribbean region. We just wanted to show that they're going onto the waiting list. For the first quarter of this year, we had 61 Caribbean organizations enter the waiting list. And after we filled in March, there were 2 that were left on the waiting list. Next slide, please. And again, this is our waiting list growth just within the ARIN region. And back in 2016, 2019, we had some really big spikes and folks weren't going on the waiting list. We now see that they go on and off of the waiting list with our quarterly distributions, and it seems to be going at a much better pace. We filled over 250 requests at the end of March, beginning of April for our waiting list distribution. Next slide, please. These are our reserve pools. They're in pretty good shape still. We have anything that is issued for Section 4.4 critical infrastructure. If that's reclaimed or returned, it goes right back to the pool, and the same for Section 410 for our transition purposes. If it's reclaimed or returned, it goes right back to the pool. So we should be in good shape for a while yet. Next slide, please. And this is our IPv6 profile under registration services plans. So we have a little over 39.5% of our IPv6 is, or I'm sorry, our IPv4 users only. That doesn't mean they don't have IPv6. They could have it from a provider peer, or they could have it in a different org ID. And with IPv6 only, there's about 10%. And again, same thing, they could have IPv4 from a provider peer or in a different org ID. And then we have about 50% that have both IPv4 and IPv6. Next slide, please. And this is our IPv6 networks created by year. And in the first quarter of 2021, we see a pretty big anomaly here. We see over 56,000 IPv6 networks being created. And we noted that one of our largest ISP customers had created almost, well, over 46,000 IPv6 SWIPs. Next slide, please. And this is IPv6 issued in the Caribbean region. Just another way to show you that they are moving into IPv6, and most countries in the Caribbean do have IPv6 now. Next slide, please. And these are the number of /24s transferred by quarter in the ARIN region. And the IPv4, or I'm sorry, the 8.4 transfers, the 29,000 that or the 26,000 that's listed there, about 2,500 of those were transferred out, and the rest of them were actually transferred into ARIN. So that's actually compiled to both in and out. Next slide, please. Let's see. So the services in the RSD structure has changed a little bit over the past 12 months. About a year ago, we started offering a chat service, and we also released a new routing registry. And last month, we moved the registration services agreement process from the end of the process up to the organization create. We're hoping that that will help remedy some of the delays at the end of the process. And in May, we'll be offering the Premier Support Plan. With these, that's brought a little more need for technical support and an increase in our customer contacts. So that's led us to a little bit of change in the RSD structure. Next slide, please. And most of these folks in RSD, you know, we have a couple new folks. We have Nathan Newman. Nathan came in, I believe, in August of last year, and he is our technical support specialist. He will be providing the technical services for our IRR, RPKI, DNSSEC, and RESTful calls. And then Reese Radcliffe is our registration services manager. He'll be doing the day-to-day operations with ticket management and working with our customer resource analysts. Next slide, please. So our chat service, which we implemented last April, and I think I've showed this once before, we do see with chat, we have about 50% of the call volume when you compare them together. We haven't seen the call volume go down, but we still receive about 50% as many chats as we do call volume. Next slide, please. Our internet routing registry, Mark talked about that a lot. We got the authenticated version of IRR and a web interface in June. And in February, we had some RESTful deployments, RESTful API deployed. And again, this is where Nathan is going to step in and take on a lot of those technical service responsibilities. Next slide, please. And this is the moving the RSA to the org create process that happened at the beginning of March. We had a lot of issues with customers that had an org created, and when they got the resources at the end, they found out their legal department would not sign with the name that they created on the org ID. So it kind of put them back to the whole beginning of the process again, where we had to get the org ID straightened out. And with that, we found a lot of folks had already scheduled vendors and consultants to come back in, which caused them some additional pain and delays just because they had to reschedule and that type of thing. So moving the RSA to the beginning of the process should alleviate all that at the end of the process. We'll make sure that we have everything correct up front. So far for the first month, we've had 319 requests for org IDs. 180 of those are still pending, where we're waiting for a registration services agreement or some vetting information from the customer. 16 of those were abandoned because they weren't legal entities, and then 123 have actually been completed with signed RSAs in March. Next slide, please. And our Premier Support Plan, John Sweeting talked to that earlier today, so I won't go over these again, but suffice it to say our customer resource analysts level 3, be Mike, Misuk, Eddie, and James will be supporting this as the dedicated account analysts. Next slide, please. And that's all I have.
If there are any questions, no? Okay. In which case, I'm going to slip in here and talk about another consultation that was an addition at the last minute.